does this not just show that all of your mental states are just grounded in the physical being of neurotransmitters and neurons that we have wired into our brain?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think it depends what you mean by grounding. I'm not denying, and no one would deny, and actually Descartes didn't deny, that there are causal relationships between what goes on in the brain and your exercise of these mental capacities. So in the case of Gage, his ability to reason was affected by deficiencies in his emotional responses, which is an absolutely fascinating phenomenon, and it's evidence against any view that tries to separate out emotional capacities from rational capacities. But the way I've just described that case is in psychological terms. I've described it in terms of emotion and rational capacity. Now, I agree with you that, in a sense, these psychological capacities are grounded in the brain, in that without a brain, we wouldn't have anything. But I still think that they are large-scale organisational properties or emergent properties of the brain or of the whole person, which can't be reduced or completely explained in terms of them. And I think actually most neuroscience proceeds in that way, although they don't say it exactly that, because you start off looking for something like, you're interested in memory, you're interested in consciousness, so you try and find out which parts of the brain are active when someone's doing memory. So the investigation starts from the top down rather than looking at the brain and trying to figure out how it works on the way up. So all I'm arguing for is the reality of the high-level emergent properties.
When you earlier said that some things have more than one cause, and you kind of portrayed Capano as saying some things only have one cause, why does something having more than one cause necessitate that one of those causes is physical and another one is mental? Couldn't you just have 2 physical causes or 10 physical causes?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, yes. Saved by the bell. Of course, this applies to, my claim about causation applies to the physical as well as to the mental. So there can be many physical causes of things as well as mental things, mental causes. But we're assuming that there are mental causes. So that was the first assumption of the argument, that there is mental causation, without assuming that it has any particular nature. So we're assuming that. Then we say every physical effect has a physical cause, and then, with a few more assumptions, then we try and get to the idea that the mental causes really are physical. I've completely inadequately represented this argument for the purposes of defeating my opponent, because actually, what Papineau and others will say is that the physical cause on its own is enough to bring about the physical effect. You'll say the physical cause on its own is enough. So when you, that is me, Crane, when you talk about many causes, that's irrelevant. Of course there are many causes. But the physical one is special because it's enough on its own. And I respond to that by saying no cause is enough on its own. There's no such thing. So that becomes a debate about cause and effect.
So you argue that something can have 2 different types of cause, a physical cause and a mental cause,
yeah.
And the result is that it has an effect, a physical effect. However, does this not lead to this idea that somehow a lesser physical cause results in a greater physical effect, and does that not indicate the conservation of energy?
I just didn't get the last. The conservation of energy says that energy has to be conserved in any interaction, any physical interaction. But this relates to your question, actually, because I don't think that the mental causes something by adding some special kind of mental energy. because energy is a physical quantity, a physical concept. So if there is mental causation, it can't be because of mental energy. Mental energy, that would just be a non-scientific fantasy. There's no such thing. It's rather that there's a kind of dependence of the effect upon the cause. So things happen. We describe this at a more abstract level, where we don't specify what the mechanism is, but we just say, if you hadn't made that decision to go and play cricket, then everything else being equal, you wouldn't have done it. And it's equally true that if your brain hadn't been in a certain condition, then you wouldn't have gone to buy the cricket bat, because that's a cause of it too. I don't know whether I've answered your question. You said something about a lesser cause.
It just seems that a greater physical effect is resulting from a lesser physical cause, and unless there's attributes of sort of physical ability to be normal.
Right. Yeah, I don't say it's a greater physical effect. It's not. I don't want to talk in those terms. I don't say they're just effects. Things happen. One thing happens, then another thing happens. Some things happen because other things happen, and that's the structure in which we understand the world.
When you talk about the brain, you talk about like parts of it don't just have control memory and parts of it don't just control consciousness. Do you not feel that because neuroscience is still quite a sort of embryonic science, it's not completely explored, this argument may significantly change with developments in brain understanding?
Yes, let me just clarify what I meant by that. Of course, psychological capacities are localized in parts of the brain. You know, vision is organized at the back of the head, for example. And the neuroscientists have made a lot of progress in identifying the areas of the brain responsible for different psychological capacities. All I'm rejecting is the idea is that they found out what, say, memory is when they found out where in the brain it's processed. So to find out where something is processed in the brain is a significant discovery, and that's incredibly important. That's not finding out what memory is, I say. It's finding out what...
The neuroscience might eventually discover what memory is.
We already know what memory is. So, no, I don't. And I think what neuroscience will find out is how memory, our capacity to remember, is realized in the complex mechanism of the brain. That's what neuroscience will find out. But whether or... I mean, here's a question. You know, could neuroscience tell us that there's no such thing as memory? Supposing that the capacities for memory were widely distributed all over the brain to such an extent that it was kind of a bit random and we couldn't identify one thing as the seat of memory, would we have then discovered that memory did not exist? I want to say that's a bad question. We can't discover that memory didn't exist.
Professor Flynn, we're really honoured that you were willing to come and speak to us today, so thank